This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Samuch Beis, and we pick it up on the bottom of Samuch Aleph Amid Beis as we delve deeper and deeper into the intricate sugyas, getting our feet, a little bit wet, and soon we're going to be diving in deeply into the incredible world of ribbis. So we're holding two lines down, Samuch Aleph Amid Beis, and we just finished discussing the limud of Neshech, the limud of Tarbis, and how the two of them are going to be in all scenarios, both by Kesef and by Peiros and the Mekairos. From there we continue, says the Gemara, Vezeu Tarbis, quoting the Mishnah on the second line, Amar Peiros Ketzad, Lakam and Achitim Dinar Zav Chulu, and due to the price change, there is one side that is gaining, one side that is not. Says the Gemara, Atu kol hani damrinan, is all of these that we learn at Hashta Lav Ribisu? Ask the Gemara, I don't really understand what's going on over here. The Mishnah makes it seem like that this is the case of Tarbis. Meaning, and it sounds like all the other cases that are mentioned in the Mishnah are not ribisu. But how could that be? Of course, we just finished saying, as we mentioned in the moment of introduction, that we hold that Neshech and Tarbis apply in all cases. So if that's true, so what does the Mishnah mean? Ezehu Tarbis. This is the case of Tarbis. Didn't we just finish saying that every case of Neshech also constitutes ribis? Says Ravua, yes, it's ribis. Yes, it's aser, but there's different levels. One is a deraisa, one is a derabonon. Says the Gemara, Adkan explains Ravua Vaiter, Yachin Rasha Vilbash Sadik, until this point of the Mishnah. This is quoting a pasuk where? A pasuk in Eov, that Rasha, the wicked one prepares, Vitzadik Gilbash, and the tzaddik will be the one to wear, meaning the one who charges interest will not enjoy that which he gains, but eventually he'll be transferred over to the tzaddik. Adkan v'suloi, says the Gemara, I don't understand. Only in cases of ribis de'araisa, that's when it doesn't get, the Rasha doesn't get to keep it. But ribis de'rabanan, he does. Ella, rather, says the Gemara, afilu adkan yachin Rasha v'yilbar sadik. Adkan ribis ksutza, mikan ve'elach avak ribis. Now that's a very important line as we learn the terminology, as we dive deeper into the world of ribis. We just said there's a difference between deraisa and derabanan. Now says the Gemara, deraisa is ribis kitzutza, prearranged, set. That's deraisa. Avak ribis is derabanan. Amar Rav Elazar, ribis ksutza yotzev dayanim. Now, once we mentioned ribis ksutza, the form of ribis deraisa, says Rav Elazar, when you have ribis deraisa, it's yotzev b'dayanim. Dayanim could force one to pay back such ribis. Avak ribis, as we said at the derabanan level, eino yotzei b'dayanim. Amar Rav Yechlan, says Rav Yechlan Amar, 6 lines from the bottom, where do we get this from? Afilu ribis ksutza nami and yotzei b'dayanim. Rav Yechlan argues and says you can never, even ribis ksutza, even on the deraisa level, it's yotzei b'dayanim. Amar Rav Yitzchak, my time to Rav Yechlan. What's the reason for Rav Yechlan? Damar Cross says the Torah b'neshech nasan v'tarbis lochach v'chai loi yichias kol ha'teivos ha'ileh. Anyone who does these teivos. From here we learn out. Let's call it teivos ha'ileh. Also lemisa nitein v'lali shavain. That the pasuk is referring to the punishment as death, but the pasuk does not refer to the fact that it's li shavain, that Bezin can force one to pay back. Ravada Barava Amar Kra, says the Torah. Al tikach mitay neshach l'tarbis reisem elikecha. L'mayra nitain. It's the psukim. The iser is l'mayra for fear of v'loyli yishavain, but not that it would cause one to pay back. Rava Amar, a third shot, and again these are all pshatim within the shita of Rav Yechlan that holds ribis ksutza is not yetziv dayanim megufa dekra shemiali. Says Rava from the pasuk itself. Mois yumas, says the pasuk. Dama of a boy yiyeh. He shall surely die. His blood is upon him. Yiyeh hokshu. Dama of boy yiyeh. Excuse me. Hokshu malvei ribis l'shevchei damim. Ma shevchei damim lo nitin liyishavain. There's no yishavain that is done by shevchei dam. He gets punished, but is going to return. Av malvei ribis lo nitin liyishavin. So three Mekayres for Rav Yechlan, that even Rib's Ksutzas Layote B'Dayanim, and now the Gemara goes to the opposing Shita, the Shita of Rav Elazar, that says Rib's Ksutzas, yes, Yote B'Dayanim. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, my time with Rav Elazar, that it is Yote B'Dayanim, Damar Kra, as we turn over to Samach Beis, Amar Aleph, Achei Achicha Yimach, that your brother shall live with you. Ahader Le, Kecha Denechi. You return it to him so that he could live. But now, of course, in the classical Gemara case, Gemara game, not really game, but in the Gemara's form of ping pong, the Gemara goes back and says, wait, so what does Rav Yechanan do with this pasuk of Rav Elazar? Rav Yechanan says it's not Yitzib B'Dayan. But Rav Yechanan, the second line is what does he do with it? Says the Gemara, you need it for the following brisa. Two people are going on the road to one of them has a flask of water. If they both drink from the water, then what's going to happen? They're going to both die, because there's not enough water for both of them. The classical shayla. But if one of them drinks, he'll be able to live. So Darash ben Petura mutav sheyishtoi shneim v'yamusu. Says ben Petura, how can you choose whose life is more valuable? They both should drink and die. And one should not witness the misa of his friend. Says Rabbi Akiva, you got it wrong. You know who should drink? The one whose flask it is. Chayecha koidmin, the penetrating words of Rabbi Akiva that we learn now from Chayecha koidmin, chaye chavercha. Yes, it is horrible to watch someone else perish, and you have some level of involvement. But it's your water, your life comes first, as much as we help others, as much as the insatiable desire, we could call it, to aid another person. But at the end of the day, we have to always remember, chayecha koinmin, l'chaye chavercha. Your life comes first. Meisvei, asked the Gemara, Akasha on Rav Yechanan. Rav Yechanan held Ribis Ksutza is lo nitin b'dayanim, is not taken out in court. Ask the Gemara, what happens if, says the Braisa, one's father leaves him over money of Ribis, even though sheyodim shein shel Ribis, they know it's Ribis, einon chayavin lachzir, they do not have to return it. And what's the obvious implication? Chayavin lachzir. The father would yes have to return it. Says the Gemara. Excuse me. Says the Gemara. You know, Rav Yechon will answer. B'tinu, really the din is ta'avu anami lo mechayev lachzir. Really, the father also wouldn't have to return it. V'aidi de kabai lemisnei seifa. Because the Seifa wanted to say, Niech lahem avian, para vitalis, that what happens if the father leaves over a cow or an article of clothing, chol davar ha-mesuyam, chayavim lachzir. Because the end of the Mishnah wanted to write that if the father leaves over any of these items, he has to return it. Why? Mimnei kavod avihim. it's dishonorable for such an item to be in the possession of the children when Gain, through illegal means, as we'll see in a moment. And ask the Gemara, 1 second. That which we said in the end of the Brisa, that due to the qadr of the fathers, it should be returned. Mi machayvi, is that true? Do the children have to return it for the father's honor? Kari Khan, we should learn from we should learn the pasuk. That the nasi in your people don't curse, and of course the classical explanation, as we've seen already, only when they're doing deeds like your am. However, in our case, if the father was one who was a malva beribis, the father was a rasha, I understand that emotionally it might feel wrong, but says the Gemara, how could the kids benefit from this? Answers the Gemara, excuse me, I said that incorrectly. Why should the kids have to return it? The father didn't do anything right. Answers Gemara, Kedamar Abichos Mishrei Derava, Bisha'asa Tshuva, Chanami Bisha'asa Tshuva. Meaning, Eino Chenami, that really you don't have to. Because really he's not Oisim Eisamcha. But the case is referring to that the father did tshuva, and that's why the kids should get rid of these objects due to the kavod aviyim. Ask the Gemara, Yasa tshuva, hey, what's going on then? Why does he have the items? If he did tshuva, he should return them. Says Gemara, he didn't have the ability to return them before he died. Continues the Gemara, says the Braisa, one who steals who lends with interest, even though they've already collected, machzirin, they should return it. Gazlanim mai. What does it mean? Excuse me, gazlanim, when it says someone who's a gazlan, what does it mean? Even though they've already collected, gazel, like gazel. Gazlin on Karslu. When we call him a gazlan, says Gemara Eleima, you know what it means. Gazlanim, I knew what is referred to by Gazlanim malvei ribis and afal pishe gavu machzirin. So what do we see? We see clearly now like Rav Yochanan answers the Gemara. We start off today on Machlekes Rav Yochanan and Rav Elazar. Whether ribis ksusa is yetziv in ayanim, explains the Gemara. Indeed, this is a Machlekes Tanoim. The Tanoyi, the Tanoim, the Chamir of Elazar ben Yankif. Poitin is Amalva is Arev Neisha Eshem Kamase. Elazar ben Yaakov and Rav Nechemia exempt the one who lends on ribis, as well as the Arev, the guarantor of such a loan. They don't get malchus. Why? Because there is a konvaseh, which means there's a positive way to rectify the deed. My konvaseh, la misham darmina luhu, we tell them kumu adruhu, go and return it. So he holds there's no malchus because you have a way to return it. So what's the implication? Mechlal, that this is the shita of Rav Yochanan and Rav Elazar ben Yankif. Tanikama savar lavnei adirin. They knew the Tanikama that holds that there is malchus, holds that there's obviously no returning of it. Says the Gemara, loy, that's not the machlekes. My konvaseh, what does it mean? There's a konvaseh likraya shtara. It means the konvaseh to rip up the document of shtar, of interest, in a case where it's not yet been collected, but not necessarily do we have a raya that if it was collected, it should be returned. Says the Gemara, Micah Savar, what's going on over here? Ika Savar, if you hold shtar milig voices kigavui dami, anytime you have a shtar that's waiting to be collected, if you collected vavdu sirayu, so then it's too late, and you did this, sir. Vilav kigamui david lavid like klum, then you didn't do anything. So what's the reason that the other Tana holds that the Tana holds there is malchus? What did you do by just writing up a shtar? Says the Gemara, Leilim Kasavar, Shtarai Miligvas Lavki Gavai Dami, Vaha Kamashalan, the Shuma Milsi. That the very placement of interest, that itself is already a punishable act by Malchus. Explains the Gemara, Achinam Mistavra, and this is logical to Tanan. Veilu Ivrim Belaisa say, a very penetrating Mishnah, a Mishnah that we'll get to in 2 weeks' time on Daf Ayin Hey. All those that are over with the Laisa say of Ribis, Hamalva Valeva Orev Eidim, the lender, the borrower, the guarantor, and the witnesses. So says the Gemara B'Shlama Kovlu of the Ma'isa. I understand the lender lent, the borrower borrowed, the Eidim testify, the Arev guaranteed. Eleidim, my Ovid, what do the Eidim do wrong? Elalav, Derayish, the Summa Milsi Shmami, no, that the mere placement, creation of the shtar is a problem, and that's the reason why the Eidim are as well incriminated for being involved in such a story. Amar Rav Safra. Says Rav Safra on the theme of when ribis is paid back, when ribis could be yotzei. Kol shilu b'dayanim moitziyin malve miloiva lemalve b'dayan kol shilu b'dinehem moitziyin miloiva lemalve b'dineinu machzir mimalve leloiva. Anything that in their laws, what is their laws? We'll see. This is the Goyish courts. We be able to take away from the borrower and give it back to the lender. Then machzirin. Then we're going to return. Anything that in their courts, the loiva would be obligated to give to the malva. I apologize. We would require for the malva to return back to the loiva. The borrower to give back to the lender to give back to the borrower. If in Goyish court they would not force the borrower to pay back to the lender, then we would not require the malvet to return it. Says the Gemara, before we even get involved in this din of Rav Safra, first we have to clarify a detail. Amar le Abaye, 6 lines to the end of Samach Beis Amarav the Rav Yosef. Uklalahu, is what you're saying really true? It's a klal. V'rei sa b'sa. What happens if someone lends a sa, a produce for another sa of produce? And the Goyish court, they would require the borrower to give it back to the lender, whether there was a price increase or not. In the Goyish court, it's irrelevant. So you borrowed a bushel of apples, you got to pay back the bushel of apples, even if it's worth more right now. And yet, yeah, we know that in our courts we would not return from the malveh to the loiva. And the reason is because this is not a case of ribis ksutza. This falls into the second category that we started off today of a vak ribis. And in such a case, there was no machlekes. Everyone agreed, ein moitziin b'dayanim, you don't take it out in dayanim. So ask the Gemara, what's going on over here? So Amar Lei, so responds Rav Yosef, Inhu b'tayras mikadain. The Goyim regard it as though it came into the possession as a pikadain asal yadei, and that's the reason why they obligate to pay him back, but not necessarily would that be a kasha on the din of Rav Safra. Amli Rav Rav Ashi, 2 lines to the bottom. Varei mashkanta. But what about a case of a mashkin, of a security, b'loy nechaisa, without any reduction? They would require the loivet to pay back such a case to the malveh. And yet, as we turn over to the Samach Beis, and the top Rashi spells out again the same reason over here, like we just said a moment ago, which is what? This is a case of avak ribis, and the fact that it didn't have the evaluation at the onset, and therefore, all would agree there would be no repayment. So Amar Lei, says Rav Ashi, Inu b'tayras zvini asali yadei. They consider it a zvini, and that's the reason why they require it to be paid back. Says the Gemara, okay. So we had 2 kashas trying to ask on Rav Safra, and both of them fell flat, as we explained why in the Goyish courts each of those cases has a unique reason to pay back. But now ask the Gemara on the Etzem Din. What exactly is Rav Safra coming to teach us? As Rashi articulates, 8 lines into the narrow lines, Hey ninu dibedineim ein moitzihem vu ribis obedineinu ein machzirin. Says the Gemara, Says the Gemara, what is going to be a case in which Dineihem in the Geisha courts, they would not enforce someone to pay back, and we would, yeah. Hachi Asa Shemina, and explains the Gemara, that in our courts, Machzirim Malva Leleiva Umayniu, Beribis Kisutza Rav Elazar. And that's good for the Raya to Rav Elazar and the Kashan Rav Yechanan that we're talking about case of Ribis Kisutza. And what do we see? We see that we would, yes, be Mitzi b'deyanim, the court would, yes, enforce it to pay back. Kol shila b'dineim ein Mitzi b'deyanim ein machzirim. That's what Ribis Mukdemes, Ribis Mucheres. More cases of avak ribis, cases of predated and postdated, cases that's not set aside at the onset, and in those cases we would not be obligated. Pesdin would not obligate one to pay back. We continue 12 lines down. Now we go into that final case of the Mishnah. And the Mishnah ended off with peculiar words. The Mishnah said, you know why it's an issue? It's an issue because you don't have wine right now. But we learned in our Braisa, you're not allowed to stipulate on fruit until the shar goes out. Yatsa shar poiskim. But once the shar goes out, then we could stipulate on fruit. Afalpi, even though she'ein lazeh yish lazeh, says the Gemara, even though Afalpi, she'ein lazeh, even though he doesn't have the item, yish lazeh, the other guy does have it. So we see in our Mishnah that when the Moicher has no yayin, we cannot transfer over the loan. Why not? The Mishnah is where he takes upon the case. They lent the wheat, he's paying back the wheat, and he transfers the wheat onto the debt of wine. And that's the reason why we learned in our Braisa. We're about 20 lines down. First one line is Bechaveira. Someone who has a claim of a mana against his friend, someone owes him a mana. And he went to his granary and he says, I have to pay me back. Where's my $100? Shani writes, you know I want $100 because I want to buy wheat. So Amrulai, the borrower says, I don't have the $100, but I have the wheat. Go out, and take the current rate of wheat now, and I will give it to you, and I will pay you out throughout the next 12 months. That instead of giving you $100, how much wheat is $100 currently worth? And I'll pay you that wheat over the next 12 months. Usr. Why? It's not like you had the money. It's not like the guy said, here's $100 and deliver the wheat over 12 months, which would be fine. But rather, it's a loan. It's alva. And therefore, because it's alva, if you're going to be paying back with wheat over 12 months, inevitably, there's going to be a price change, which you're going to come to ribis. And that's the reason why, similarly in the Mishnah, it's going to be Asr. For not viewing it as if the money came to his hands, why did the Mishnah say it's only if he doesn't have the wine? Even if he had the wine, it'll be Asr. The Mishnah is talking about the case of ribis, as they learned in Yeshiva Rav Chia, the Tani Rav Safar, ribis Rav Chia. Here it is. Yesh Devarim, there are items. Shehem mutarim v'asurim imnei haromas ribis. So concedes the Gemara that the reason why in a Mishnah it's a problem is not full-fledged ribis. That be'etzem, it should be mutter, but it has a stigma of ribis. It's a haromas ribis. Ketzad, Amrle Alveni Mana. Someone says, let me a mana, let me 25 sela. Amrle Mana, ein li chitim b'mana yesh li shani nice l'cha that'll give you. Nice l'chitim b'mana, he gives him chitim worth the mana. V'chazer v'lachim enu, b'esiv ha'arba sela. He gives him wheat worth of mana, and then he buys it back for him for 24 sela. Mutter. It's mutter because everything was galat. I owed you a mana. A mana was worth of 25 of wheat. I give you that, and then I buy it back from you for 24 slayim. That's going to be mutter. But v'aser lasos came and they are ramas ribis. And as much as it's really mutter, the reason you shouldn't do it is because of haramas ribis, meaning the borrower needed the cash, and therefore, even though if he would have waited to sell till tomorrow, he would have gotten 25, but he sold it today so that he could get back to because he wanted the money, so he sold it at a discount of 24. So really, there's nothing wrong over here. There was a loan, there was a transfer of cash, there was in the form of the full thing of wheat, and then he bought it back. But still, you shouldn't do it because it looks like ribis. Haramas ribis. Hochanami, so too. Ki going to Amr Alveni Shlishim Dinar. Says the Gemara, so too is the Dinar Mishnah. Someone lends 30 dinar, Amr Shlishim Dinar, mainly, but Chitim Shlishim Dinar, Yesh Lishani, nice in the Cha. So the borrower gives him back wheat of 30. Nice Chitim Shlishim Dinar, and Vachazav Lacha, Emenu, Bedinar Zaf. And then he buys it back for him for dinner Zaf for 25. So same thing, this is when the Mishnah is going to be saying that it should not be done. Why? Because of Haram Asribis. But now, says the Gemara, 1 second. And now the end of the Mishnah says he doesn't have Yayin. And if he had wine, then that he would be able to give him right now that's worth 30 dinar, then Peiru de Kashakal. Then it would be considered Peirais. Minei v'leslan ba, and there'd be no problem. V'iloi kim de lesle chamra vadim mishkalzuze minei mechsi kiribis. And that's the issue in the Mishnah, because if you don't have wine, it looks like it's a ribis transaction, is the stigma of this haramas ribis, and that's the reason why it should not be done. Pick it up from here, b'siyata dishmaya.